Hey everyone, it's Pitika from Rock Daydream Nation, and I've got Bicyclelegs back to the channel. How are you, mate?
Yeah, always a pleasure to be on the channel, Peter. Looking forward to this topic too.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about the album from, yes, the big blockbuster album from 1983, which is 90125. And the topic of today's show is, did this album save Yes? So before we answer that question, we're going to do a little bit of a song by song analysis, talk about our first impressions of the band in the day, talk about the performances, just talk about all things Yes. So Bicyclelegs, tell us, what was your first encounter with this album in the day?
Well, I mean, obviously, my first encounter with this album was what it was for, I think, the vast majority of people, which was the Owner of a Lonely Heart single. That came out in late 1983. I would have been all of 12 years old at the time, and I remember loving the song instantly. I didn't buy the album straight away because I was young. I only had limited pocket money, and you could only get sort of one album a month with that sort of money. But it's something I definitely put in the memory banks. And then later on, when I started getting into progressive music and getting into Yes's 70s stuff and that sort of thing, I came back and had a look at this as a whole album. And I've always loved this album. I think it's a great record.
Yeah, absolutely. I did owe that. Look, for me, Owner of a Lonely Heart was a huge hit. And to be quite frank, it gets played on classic radio to this very day. I'll come out and say it's probably in my top 100 of all time favorite songs. I love it to death. And that was my entry point for this album. And I think when you buy the album and you listen to it, you find out there's actually more,
Mm.
some really, truly great songs. So, why don't we just have a bit of a, I'll just do a little bit of admin first, and then we can just get into the topics of the songs in
Yep.
general. So this hit the US top 10, hit number 5. I think it's gone 3 platinum, but to be fair, it's probably done more. UK, it went top 20, number 15, and I think it went top 20 in Australia. Now, Owner of the Lonely Heart is the only number one song for Yes. So it's a little bit of an outrider, and it was an absolute huge hit. So that really propelled the sales of the album. This album was produced by Trevor Horn, and fair to say this was a real springboard for his career, wasn't it, Bicyclelegs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think he just started doing production. He may have done the first ABC album before this, but it was definitely at the start of what he would then, for the next couple of years, he would become the producer du jour, as it were, certainly in British music.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the three elements to the success of this album are Trevor Horn, John Anderson on vocals, and Trevor Rabin. Fair comment?
Oh, absolutely. I think they're the three guys, but don't underestimate the contributions of Chris Squire
Oh,
because he's all over
absolutely.
this album as well.
Absolutely. But, I just think those three are just shining stars on it. And the musicology of Trevor Rabin, the songs that he brought to this project, it just seems to work beautifully with John Anderson's voice. And then you've got Trevor Horn, who's like a mad scientist, bringing all the samples and the whiz bangery that, sort of he sort of demonstrated through the rest of his career in the 80s. It's all here on show, and you can sort of understand why this was a bit of a crossover hit.
Oh, absolutely.
So, Owner of the Lonely Heart, I think this song is probably got one of the most iconic starts with that sample, that drum sample. And I believe
Mm.
it's a 3-second drum sample from a song called Cool Is Back by Funk Incorporated. If we were on a trivia show or we went to the pub and playing pub trivia, if you heard that sample, you'd know straight away it's Owner of a Lonely Heart, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I believe Trevor Horn had put this sample aside. He was around about this same time he was also doing Duck Rock with Malcolm McLaren. Underrated album that, by the way. And he had this sampled, and he was going to be using that originally for the Duck Rock album, but he ended up using it here instead. It is an iconic opening, and yeah, it is one of those things. You know, you get those little games on your phone where you've got to try and guess the song in 1 second. This one would be one of the easiest ones, I think, just from that little drum fill.
And when you think of the 80s production with Trevor Horn, the typical Trevor Horn sound is lots of samples, lots of string stabs, lots of percussion, lots of, even horns. And you can see the genesis of the Trevor Horn sound and the influence to so many bands, whether it's synth pop or rock, can be traced back to this song.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, just all those little bits that you talked about there. But one of the things I think is interesting about this song is it doesn't have the big bang crash walloping drums on it. That was so ubiquitous in the 80s. In fact, when we look at a couple of the songs on this album, they do have the big sort of bang crash wallop drums. But this one, you get through that, it has those big crunchy guitars after that drum sample. Um, and then it goes into this groove, and it starts just playing the dun 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 dun, and the drums behind it are actually, you know, they're not sort of, Phil Collins, wall of sound, gated drum sort of thing. They're just a really nice drum sound, in fact.
Yeah,
So,
it's brought back
he knows
halfway
when
in the
to,
mix, isn't it? It's just brought back.
yeah,
It's not in your face. It's just brought back.
yeah, absolutely. So, Trevor Horn knows how to use subtlety as well. He's not all about, he wasn't just all about whiz bang tricks and all that sort of thing. He could use subtlety as well in his productions.
Absolutely. And, I'm professing my love for Trevor Horn's production, but the song was always numero uno. He would do everything to service the song. So he wasn't one of those producers where the production would just embellish and overwhelm and drown the song. It was always, he would just, what would serve this song best? I've got another factor why I think this really caught on with American radio, because I think America in 1983 was in love with the Police. Everything the
Mm.
Police did was just magic dust. They could do no wrong. And if you isolate the guitar line in this song, it's very Andy Summers. It sounds like a
Yeah.
Police guitar line. Would you agree that's another component that caught the ears of the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. That sort of dun 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 dun. Yeah, it's very Andy Summers now that you mention it. It's not something I'd really sort of thought of, but now that you sort of have put that thought in my head, I can hear it. Absolutely. Yeah, it's very Andy Summers, very synchronicity style Police in particular, which was another album that came out in 1983. So,
And you can see a smile on my face because I think you know where I'm leading to. We've been having a
yes.
little private conversation, and I threw a wild card, as I do to Bicyclelegs at all hours of the night. He probably goes, "Oh, here he goes again." And I said, "Can you imagine Sting singing this song?" And the first thing was, "No," and I hope he doesn't. Something like that. And I
Mm,
said, "Really, I can." And that's the connection.
yeah. And as I said to you offline, I mean, yeah, Sting could sing it. I don't know that it would have the same quality because, John Anderson, as I was saying, sort of he has an airiness to his voice, a breathiness. Even when he's sort of getting a little bit oomph into his vocal and getting a little more aggressive with his vocal, there's still that airiness. Whereas Sting, even though he sings high, he's a much ballsier singer, if you know what I mean. He's a much more aggressive singer, I think, than John Anderson is, and that's why I think it may not quite work with this song. But I mean, he's certain, Sting certainly got the pipes to sing this song, but
Yeah, he doesn't have the ethereal tonality. But
exactly.
I talk to a lot of folk, and I think John Anderson is a very divisive singer. I love his vocals, but
Mm,
I was playing this CD. We're going up the country for holidays, and I said to my wife, what do you think of this John Anderson? I go, oh, take it or leave it. And there's a few other folks that don't like his vocals. I don't understand because I personally love it. And I think his vocals really have a perfect marriage with the music on this album, especially this song. But look, I think, the reason why I threw this left field about Sting is because of the guitar line. And I'm sure that it would have been a huge hit, but it would have been a different interpretation.
Yeah.
But getting back on point, I think John's vocals are fantastic in this song. I think the arrangements are great. And I've got to talk about the bass and the bottom end. It is really funky and it bounces around. Now, I'm a closet bass fan. I love the bass. And I've listened to heaps of extended remixes of this, and it really stretches out that funky bit, where it gets into the owner of all that. And you hear the bass line and it's bouncing around. What do you think?
Well, I mean, Chris Squire is one of the all-time great bass players. It's as simple as that. But this is quite different from the sort of bass lines he was playing in the 70s. The bass lines he was playing in the 70s were usually much further up the neck, quite trebly, obviously very, very complex bass lines that he was often playing in the 70s as well. You think of the, Roundabout and songs like that. This isn't that. But it's so good in the song what Chris Squire plays on this song. In the verses, it's just that boom, 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 boom. But then, he'll do
And then
little
boom, boom,
licks
boom,
up to
boom, 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 and just really
yes.
a real groove to it. There's a lot of groove.
Yeah.
And I think Trevor Horn's production just really accentuates that. And you can understand that there were a lot of dance remixes because this is the start of the 12-inch single and a lot of mainstream hits that were remixed so they could put it out into the clubs. And you can understand how this was a very easy transfer from the basic tracks into something that's kind of dancey.
Yeah, absolutely. I should have pulled it out, but I actually have the 12-inch of this as well. No picture sleeve or anything like that, but just a basic sort of sleeve. And it is a great remix too. But the one other thing about this song, we've talked about John Anderson's vocals and how good they are. Trevor Rabin sings the chorus and he sings it beautifully. He's got a lovely, pure voice that we will be hearing quite a lot on this album.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. The video. Now, the video on our TV show that was very popular in Australia called Countdown was censored. It's a very concept video, a little bit scary, a little bit surreal. It's quite out there, isn't it? And this was the kind of in the golden age of MTV, where a lot of the videos that were done by major artists were very conceptual.
Yeah.
What do you think of the video?
Yeah, it's trippy. Certainly like the full length one too, that's got these little asides and things like that in it. There's the bit where he washes his face with the like grubs or whatever it is, and yeah, it's pretty gross stuff. And he's got the spider on his face and all that sort of thing. I mean, spiders aren't as scary for us Australians, but I know for people overseas, they're scared to death of spiders. But yeah, it's a weird, trippy sort of film clip, and but I think it works. I think it's the sort of thing that MTV were really getting into and playing a lot. So it was a good move to make a clip like that for this song, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we'll go to the second song on the album, Hold On. Now, I've got to say something. The sequencing of this album is, in my opinion, is perfect. It's just
Yes.
got it just builds up dynamics. Everything's in the right place. And I think Hold On is a really wonderful follow-up to Owner of a Lonely Heart. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a very different track because, I mean, Owner of a Lonely Heart is funky. It's, a little bit out there as far as production goes and that sort of thing. This is a much straighter song. It's a sort of a 6/8 shuffle. It's this musically, the song is quite, straight. There's no sort of twiddly bits and and all that sort of thing. But what this song has for me is what I have always called Yes's special sauce, and that is those harmonies between John Anderson and Chris Squire. Um, they send shivers down my spine when I hear the two of them singing together. And you get that a lot on this song. It's almost a duet in a way between John and Chris. And the way those two men's voices blend together, it's just, it's my favorite thing about Yes. And I know there's a lot to love about Yes over the years, but that is my absolute favorite thing about Yes is those vocal harmonies. So I love this song to death just for that.
Yeah, I agree with you. The bit where it's a cappella towards the end is just sheer bliss. Especially it's when you've got the headphones on and it shivers at the back of your spine. I love the bluesy guitar lines in this. There's some
Mm.
really dirty guitar lines, and look, I don't profess to be the biggest connoisseur of Yes, but I love this album. The hard rock and the bluesy guitar lines, is that a typical of a Yes album?
Well, no, I mean, that's the thing, this album put a lot of traditional Yes fans' noses out of joint because it doesn't sound like Yes albums that had come before it. Even the one that was immediately before this was an album called Drama. It had Trevor Horn on it as the lead singer instead of John Anderson. It had Jeff Downes on keyboards, so you had the two guys from the Buggles in Yes. It's a wonderful album. It's a very different album from this, though. You don't think Trevor Horn so much when you listen to that album. It sounds more like a slightly hard rock version of a traditional Yes album. It's still very progressive, you know. And the other thing is, Trevor Rabin is such a good guitarist, but he could not be really much more of a different guitarist from Steve Howe. Steve Howe is a psychedelic guitarist. He goes into sort of bluegrass and all that sort of thing when he plays. And, he still considers himself a psychedelic guitarist first and foremost. Whereas Trevor Rabin, very much a blues and hard rock, as you say, sort of guitar player. So that was a very different sound for Yes. So yeah, a lot of traditional sort of 70s Yes fans didn't like this album at all when it first came out.
Yeah, I read an interview with Richie Blackmore, and they said, "What albums were you listening to ahead of putting down Perfect Strangers, which was the comeback album for Deep Purple, 1984?" And he said, "Look, we actually benchmarked ourselves on Yes and the 90125 album. We thought that was absolutely fantastic." And that's high praise indeed for Richie. He doesn't give out compliments very often. So
No.
I think that the rock sound, the guitar tone of Raven was very much 1983. And this is another reason why this album did cross over. And, it sold. It sold a lot
Yeah,
of copies.
absolutely. I don't think Yes could have had a hit record doing what they were doing in the 70s in 1983. It's just as
Yeah,
simple as that.
yeah, yeah. It can happen. Starts off with a little bit of sitar, then you've got the keyboard. This is a message of hope, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful song. The film clip for this, though, if you ever get the chance to see the film clip for this, it's horrible. Um, it's mostly a performance clip, and Trevor Rabin once said that he's wearing so much makeup he looks like Freddie Mercury in it. But yeah, I love this song. It's got that sitar sort of riff going throughout the whole thing. Again, you've got those beautiful, John Anderson sings the verses, and then they get into that sort of "it can happen to you, it can happen to me." You get the blending between John and Chris again, which absolutely beautiful stuff. And then you get Chris Squire doing a solo uh, vocal on the "look up, look down, look out, look around" part. That's Chris singing. And I love that he gets a little lead vocal there because I always thought Chris was a great singer. And if you've never heard his solo album, Fish Out of Water, do yourself a favor because it's a wonderful, wonderful album. But yeah, this is a great song and it's a different feel again, from Owner of a Lonely Heart to Hold On to It Can Happen. You talked about the sequencing. It is brilliant sequencing. And side one in particular is just, an A plus side of music from beginning to end.
Killer, 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 no filler. I think this song does play up to the new wave. And a lot of this album, I mean, a lot of this album does play into what was happening in the music in 1983, and it's very new wavy, and you can sort of understand why it had that crossover. Changes. What do you think of this one?
Oh, Changes. What a great song. I mean, it starts off with that, the Yes fans that were crying out for something proggy, you get it at the beginning of this song, that din 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 din. It's in a weird, tricky time signature. It's a great riff. Apparently, it was Alan White who came up with that opening too. That's why he gets a writing credit on this song. But yeah, I mean, this is a really good song, and this is a great showcase for Trevor Rabin's vocals because he sings the verses. Um, John Anderson comes in for the choruses, and then Trevor Rabin gets to really soar in this sort of middle eight section. Um, you know, um, the part where it goes, for some reason you're questioning why I always believe it gets better. He really soars vocally on that. I love it, love it, love it. It's a hard rocking song. It's got great momentum and stuff. I really, really think this is a brilliant way to close out side one.
Changes. It's a really, really good song. I like the lyrics because it talks about stages of grief and loss, and it's sort of about reconciling the end of a relationship. But Trevor Rabin was interviewed. He was brought over to South Africa on a development deal with Geffen Records, and they basically said to him, "Write like Foreigner." And he said, "Well, no." And this song came out of that experience with the corporate record world. So interesting. But my interpretation of the lyrics is more of a personal thing about the different stages of, when you lose somebody, grief, reconciling,
Mm.
and that's a wonderful thing about lyrics. You can just relate it to your own experiences, or everyone's got their own interpretation. But I think it's a really good song. I like how it's got different movements, and it's so hooky. This is one of the most hooky albums that
Mm.
came out of 1983. There are so many hooks in this album, isn't it?
Yeah.
Melodically.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many things that just little bits, little sort of key things that'll just become earworms. And, I was listening to this album again this morning, even though I've heard it 100 times plus, I was listening to it again this morning because who needs an excuse not to listen to this album? Uh, yeah, I mean, it just absolutely. And then the end of this song too, it comes to that full stop that, dun, 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 it's back to that opening and a diddle dent dent dun. Just a perfect way to end a side of vinyl.
Great album closer. And we flip over the album and we've got the wonderful instrumental Cinema. What do you think of
Yes.
this?
Well, it's great. I mean, the band were originally called Cinema too before John Anderson joined, and they sort of morphed into Yes. They won a Grammy for this for Best Rock Instrumental. It's a great little piece. It shows all of the band off, like apart from John, obviously, because there's no vocals on it. It's an instrumental, but it shows the rest of the band off really well. You've got some scorching guitar from Trevor Rabin. You've got great bass playing from Chris Squire. You've got some frantic, furious drumming from Alan White, and some really great keys from Mr. Tony Kaye. So, apparently this it's a 2 minute instrumental. Apparently it was the introduction to a 20-minute piece that they never ended up finishing off. So I would love to have heard what that would have been. But yeah, it's a great instrumental. And again, what a great way to introduce side two of the record too. And I love the way it blends into the next track. So yeah, it's perfect.
how do you think the band would have gone if they retained the name Cinema and treated it as a new entity? Do you think the fans would have embraced it, or it wouldn't have sold as many copies as being Yes? Because obviously the name Yes has attaches a lot of different feelings, emotions, a history, a legacy.
Yeah.
But you said it pissed off a lot of the Yes fans because it was completely different. How do you think it would have
Mm.
gone with the name Cinema?
I think Owner of a Lonely Heart would have been a hit no matter what.
I
I don't
agree.
care what name, I don't care what name you give the band. Owner of a Lonely Heart would have been a hit. It's and I think the album would have done all right. I think touring, I think, is where the name Yes really sort of helped because it would make them be able to book a much bigger tour in much bigger venues than they would have even off the back of a hit like Owner of a Lonely Heart. I don't know that they would have been able to book the tour that they booked, throughout 1984 and 1985 that they did on the back of this album by calling it Yes. So I think that's where the name Yes really, really helped.
I can just sort of imagine the tour poster cinema featuring and would have had the
Mm.
word yes a few times to try to get that across. But I guess the record company just strong armed them and said, hey, guys, it's just easier. Let's just call it Yes.
Absolutely.
And reel in the old fans. Who cares if they get pissed off? They bought a copy, and we can get some
Mm.
new fans in too.
Yeah, and they certainly did get a lot of new fans in.
Okay, so Leave It.
Yeah, this is probably the song that most divided the old Yes fans because this sounds absolutely nothing like anything that the band had ever done before, and it really doesn't sound like anything they would ever do after this either. It really is a kind of a one-off song. It's, mostly a cappella. It's got, this do 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 these vocals, and there's like all these different layered vocals and sampled vocals, played on a keyboard and that sort of thing. It's got electronic drums played by Alan White, and that would have horrified a lot of Yes fans as well, I think. I think it's a really great, catchy song. It's a one-off. It's one of those things that I say sometimes about certain songs on certain albums. I really like it, but I'm glad they didn't do a whole album of it. You know, but as a one-off as a like a change of pace on the album, I think it works really, really well.
Well, there's two sides of the ledger here. It can be bad like Bobby McFerrin, or it can be
Mm,
good like this, and I love it. I think this is one of my favorite songs. It's just got so much joy. It's so quirky, and being participant in high school in choirs and primary schools. I don't know if you were ever in the school choir, but doing rounds, it was always fun.
mm,
And to me, even if it's artificial, it's just got so much joy, and it brings back the joy of singing. You know what I mean? I think
mm.
it's a palate cleanser. That's what it
Yeah,
is.
absolutely. I mean, the main vocals are all properly sung, but those little, vocal noises in the background, or I think that a lot of those are done on synclavier. So, they're sampled voices then played on the synclavier keyboard. So I think it works great. I really like it. But as I say, I'm glad I don't have a whole album of Yes doing that. So,
That Trevor Horn, he's a mad scientist, isn't he? And
mm,
there's a lot of samples that he used in this that ended up in the art of noise.
yes.
You can sort of, like a lot of say, what is the Trevor Horn sound? And I always say it's Zum Tum Tum, ZTT. Frankie Goes to Hollywood. The whole record label was built around the Trevor Horn sound, and there's just
Yes.
so much of it in this album, isn't it?
Yeah, there absolutely is.
Our song. What do you think of
Yes.
this one?
Again, a really sort of bright sounding song, isn't it? It starts off with that lovely sort of organ sound from Tony Kaye, that, dun, 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 dun. It's almost like a fanfare at the beginning of the song, which is really cool. Again, beautiful vocals from John Anderson and Chris Squire weaving together. Just absolutely love that sound to death. Again, a very positive lyric too. It wasn't just John Anderson that would write these sort of positive vibes kind of lyrics. Trevor Rabin could write in a very different style than John Anderson. It's not that sort of hippy dippy kind of thing that John Anderson would do. But Trevor Rabin's still writing these really sort of positive vibe kind of songs lyrically, which I think are really, really good too. So it's a really great song. I love how it kind of goes into a halftime in the choruses. In the verses it's really energetic and it's going along, and then they cut it back to halftime for the choruses, the our song, and it gets kind of stately for the choruses, and then goes back into double time for the verses again. So yeah, it's a really, really good song. It takes you on a ride, and I always love songs that do that. So
It's got a hyperkinetic melody, and it's sort of adjacent to a lot of that AOR that was coming out, like Survivor and Journey, the very melodic side of it. I love Tony Kaye's piano, and those little minor piano chords really
mm,
anchor the song and give it a lot of gravity. There's a lot of urgency on this song. It
yes.
seems to have this energy. City of Love. So this starts off with a little bit of a discord, and you've got this orchestral swirl, and then it goes into something that's kind of hard hitting.
Yeah.
What do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, again, another change of pace, because this song's kind of heavy, isn't it? It's dark and it's menacing, which really nothing else on the album really has that kind of feel. You don't expect that kind of hard rock grunt from Yes either. You didn't get that. Steve Howe's not a hard rock player. He just isn't. And you get really crunchy guitars on this, and the vocals are harsher than they are on the other parts of the album. You know, and John Anderson's really sort of rasping his voice a bit on this song, which I think works really, really well. Um, especially, we'll be waiting for the night, we'll be waiting for the night to come. You get all three of them singing in harmony on that chorus. Um, which is a different sound from just John and Chris. When you add Trevor Rabin to that sound too, it makes it sound different again. So it's really good. And it's a great change of pace because, as I say, there isn't anything else on the album quite like this. So I think it works really well as sort of second to last track.
Yeah, in a really good album, this is probably my least favorite song because, other than the chorus, which I think is ultra catchy, I don't think the hooks and the rest of the song sort of are as smooth. I don't think they're as catchy as the
Mm,
rest of the album. It doesn't sort of fit in, but I still think it's got a lot of merit. I love that chorus, and let's face it, if you lifted the needle after this song, what would stick with you? It's the chorus. Trevor Rabin's smoking guitar, I think 4 minutes 48, he just really just lets go. And
mm.
folks, if you did isolated guitar lines, if they did a YouTube show and they just focused on Trevor Rabin, wow. I mean, that would be fun to hear because he's just having a ball. He is a very
Mm.
underrated guitarist, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, Hearts. Got to
Yeah.
finish up this great album with an epic, and this is an epic. Now, to me, before I go back to you, it
Mm.
starts off like a little bit like old, yes, medieval. You've got a delicate synth riff, a little bit minstrel. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Absolutely. I think that this and Changes are the two songs on the album, which, funnily enough, they're both the side closes. Close side one, close side two are definitely the two songs that harken back a little bit to classic 70s Yes. And definitely those that the introduction to this song, yeah, that it's definitely got that. I could hear Rick Wakeman playing that keyboard part, you know, and it's a beautiful vocal at the beginning from John. Then you get the verses sung by Trevor, and he sings them beautifully. Uh, and then you get again that beautiful blend of John and Chris. So you have all the different vocal elements from the band in this one song to sort of close things out, which is really, really great. And I love the little coda at the end of this song. It builds, this song builds and builds and builds to a crescendo. And then it has this really quiet coda at the end that just washes you out on the album, and I think just is just a beautiful little delicate. It reminds me, it's the very end of this song reminds me of a song on the Tomato album called Circus of Heaven, which was a John Anderson song, and is very sort of light-hearted and you know, sort of head in the clouds kind of thing. And that's how the very end of this song feels to me. That, as we flow down life's rivers, I see the stars glow one by one. It's just, it, it's that sort of John Anderson lyric too. I'll bet anything he wrote that lyric at the end of this song because it's got that kind of hippy dippy kind of John Anderson vibe to it, which I think is a beautiful way to end the album.
Mate, you're on fire. I'm just admiring what you were saying. I've got nothing much more to say. No, that's excellent. I love just two more things. I love the 2 minute 38 into the song. It goes two hearts a beat as one, and that beautiful ethereal vocal bit, just beautiful. And then 4 minutes 42, it goes deep purple. You got the Hammond organ out and this heavy guitar, and I can understand why Black is Richie Blackmore. Oh, okay. Come on, let's get into it. Let's roll the sleeves up. Epic closer.
Yeah, it's the perfect way to end an almost perfect album.
Absolutely, almost perfect. And it throws just enough of a bone to those older fans to go, just remind them of the sound of then. So it's sort of like a melding of the then and now as it was in 1983. I would have loved to seen the tour.
Yeah.
We always miss out, don't we, down under? But I heard it was.
They never came to Australia for that one.
Well, look who we've got here. We've got a special guest, Davey Cretin. How are you, mate? Good to see you.
I'm good. I'm wearing my Yes shirt.
Fantastic. Now, we brought Davey onto the show because Davey actually saw Yes in the day, 1984-85. Isn't that right,
84.
Davey? 84. Yep. Share some experiences. What were they like? Tell us more. I want to hear.
Well, I was a big Yes fan. I discovered Yes when I was listening to rock radio, FM rock radio here in the States in the late 70s. The first album I bought new was Drama when it came out. Then Classic Yes, and I was buying the back catalog. I bought 90125 new. It came out right before my birthday in November of 83. And I saw the 55th show of the tour. It was May 11th, Friday, Nassau Coliseum, Long Island, New York. And they did 4 legs of the tour, and I was at one of the shows. They were supposed to do 144 shows, but they canceled 3 of some of the last shows in South America. So they did 141 shows on this tour from Feb 84 to Feb 85. And I saw them May 84. And it was a great show. It was the first time I saw Yes, and I've seen them probably at least 3 dozen times since then. I've seen them tour every studio record except the last 2.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, the set list for this show in 84, was it very weighed heavily with 90125? Would you say it was 50% old and the album 90125?
Well, they switched a couple of songs in and out during the tour, but the show that I saw, they did 8 out of 9 songs from the record. They did every song except Our Song. That was the only one that they didn't do at my show. They were doing it earlier in the tour, and they dropped it.
Highlights.
So
do you remember any highlights? What were the highlight songs for you from your memory?
Hearts, definitely my favorite song from the record. And when they did the old stuff, they did Yours Is No Disgrace at my show, which they later dropped. And they also did Long Distance Runaround, which they later dropped. So I got to see those two songs. They had a lot of solos. Each member had a solo. Anderson did the Soon section from Gates of Delirium with Kay backing him up on keyboard pads. And something that a lot of people don't know is that, yes, at this time, Eddie Jobson was supposed to be a member, but he dropped out due to a lot of political stuff. And Tony Kaye was in, Tony Kaye was out. And when Tony Kaye came back, Jobson said bye. Yes had an offstage keyboard player for this tour. Underneath the stage, there was a guy named Casey Young playing keyboards. He was augmenting Tony Kaye, because my friends and I always used to make fun of Tony Kaye. He's a good keyboard player, but he's no Wakeman, he's no Emerson, not even Jeff Downs. He used to play with one hand and sort of wave to the crowd with the other hand. So my friends and I, this was our Tony Kaye impression back in the day.
Have you heard that before, Bicyclelegs? They had
Yeah, I had heard that there was like an offstage keyboard player, but it was partly because there were too many keyboard parts, because, Trevor Rabin played a lot of keyboard on 90125, as well as Tony Kaye. But it's also because Tony Kaye, very good keyboard player, but he's not a gearhead. He wasn't into the latest tech with all the synths and all that sort of thing. So they needed a second keyboard player to be able to cover those parts that Tony just couldn't get his head around, the technical, not the playing part of it, but sort of the technical button pressing part of it.
100% correct.
Why wouldn't they put him up on stage? Why would they put him out of mind, out of sight?
Sabbath always did it. Their keyboard players were off stage. Same with Ozzy.
Yeah, I understand.
Same with you too.
And Whitesnake when they had just Psych solo. But with a band like that, do you think it would have looked a bit awkward with that extra keyboardist on stage? I don't know what the stage set or the backdrop was like, but do you think it would have been awkward to have an additional keyboard on stage?
At the time, they were always known as a 5-piece band. So they were keeping that aesthetic.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen the video from this tour, and it's quite an austere 80s looking set. It's not like the big sets they had in the 70s with the Roger Dean sort of, creatures and all this sort of thing. It was quite an austere, very 80s looking. The outfits they were wearing were very 80s. So I don't know. They could have fit a second keyboard player on the stage, but as Davey's kind of pointing out, Yes have always been known as a 5-piece band at that stage. So I think it just would have been a bit jarring for the older Yes fans to see a second keyboard player on stage.
And that's my next question, Davey. What was your recollection of the audience? Was it cross-generational, or was it mostly the oldies, the older 70s crew?
Whoa, that I don't remember, because from what I saw, where is it in my notes here? The show that I saw took place, it's on the other side. Oh, darn it. 40 years, 9 months, and 10 days ago. I was on a Yes archive site, and this show that I looked up to confirm the set list was what it said on setlistfm.com. 40 years, 9 months, 10 days ago from today, the day we're filming. So it's a long time ago, almost 41 years. The audience, I don't remember. I remember my friends and I enjoyed it. It was one of my first shows. I began seeing shows in 1980, so I didn't see that many, maybe 1 or 2 a year. So this was probably my 6th or 7th show. And I was still a teenager at this point seeing Yes. But it was great. I remember writing down the set list on a piece of paper that I still have somewhere, but I couldn't find that. But luckily for the internet, I confirmed that the set that I saw is the same that I thought.
Yeah. Look, with the album itself, what are your favorite tracks?
Definitely Hearts, and some of the B-sides that they released later in 1991 on the Yes Years box set, the 12x12 4-CD box set. There are 2 demos of Cinema Songs, which is Yes's name before the project's name, before it became Yes, with Phil Carson sort of shoehorning John Anderson in, saying you'll sell more records if it's called Yes. So there were 2 demos on this box set. One is called Make It Easy, which is a great Trevor Rabin song. So it's Rabin, White, Squire, and maybe Kaye on keyboards, probably most of the keyboards by Trevor Rabin, and another song called It's Over. And those are two great power rock songs. And if you guys know Trevor Rabin's solo album from 1989 on Elektra, Can't Look Away, that fits right in. Those two songs would fit right in on that record perfectly. So they're 6-minute rock songs with great keyboards, great hooks, stellar guitar work, and you got Squire and White on the rhythm section. So I recommend, if you guys don't know those songs, Make It Easy and It's Over. Those are two great songs. And on the tour, when I saw the band tour, and it's on the video that Bicyclelegs was describing, before they did Owner of a Lonely Heart, they had this cool instrumental intro. And it turns out that that was the first minute and a half of Make It Easy before the vocals kick in. And when that box set came out, I said, that's the song that they played in concert when I saw them 7 years ago. I was wondering what that was, and it turned out to be a whole song. And that's one of my favorite Yes songs, Make It Easy. Definitely could be my favorite song from the Trevor Rabin era.
It's always great when you discover something that it's been a mystery for such a long time, and it's instantly sold. Bicyclelegs, are you familiar with these songs? I'm not. I'm sort of.
Yeah, I've definitely heard Make It Easy. The other one I'm not so sure about, because I don't know if I have that box set, or if I do, it's been forever and a day since I pulled it out and played it. But Make It Easy, I was going to mention what Davey did about it, him using a little bit of that song as an intro to Owner of a Lonely Heart when they would do it live. But yeah, it's a really good song. I definitely agree with Davey. It would have fit right in on the rest of 90125, but 90125 was already a 45-minute album, so there was no way they could shoehorn it in.
Right. It's a great song, though. I love that song.
So, Davey, out of this concert, did that inspire you to go into the catalogue and just collect everything? Yes. Were you?
I think by then I already had everything by then. I mean, maybe the first two albums were hard to find on vinyl here in the States because they never really sold. It was the Yes album, the third album, that made them worldwide stars. So the first two albums, I know I got them last because it took me a while to find them.
What was the song that really got you on the Yes kick as a young bloke? What was it?
I mean, in America, they were playing Roundabout, Long Distance Runaround. Yours Is No Disgrace on the radio, not Perpetual Chains. What's the other one from the Yes album? I've Seen All Good People, of course. Oh, Starship Trooper. That's it. That's a great song. All those early songs. And when I got the vinyl for Fragile and I heard South Side of the Sky, that blew my mind. I love South Side of the Sky, which I saw them perform later on for the Masterworks tour in 2003 or so.
Yep. So you said that you've seen Yes subsequent to 84. How do the subsequent tours hold up comparative to 1984? As good or not quite?
Some are better, some worse. Depends on the lineup. I saw Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe. I saw the Union tour. That was great. The album, not so good from Union. That's not a great Yes record. Some highlights, a lot of lowlights. But the tour, that could be the best Yes tour I've ever seen because you had the 8-man configuration. Yes West, as they were called, and then Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe put together. And that tour was great. It was like a 2-hour and 45-minute tour. And I saw that tour multiple times, probably at least half a dozen times. I've seen Yes more than any other band, probably maybe 40 times, at least 36 plus times.
Excellent. And Bicyclelegs, you've seen Yes as well, haven't you? You want to tell the viewers?
I've only seen them the once, and it was on that 2003 tour. They came out to Australia. It was the first time they'd been to Australia in 30 years. So we never got the 90125 tour or anything like that. So the last time they toured here, they were still writing. It was in hotel rooms in Australia in 1973 that John Anderson and Steve Howe started writing Tales from Topographic Oceans. So it would have been the Close to the Edge tour that they came out here on. So I saw them in 2003. It was, the classic lineup of John Anderson, Chris Squire, Steve Howe, Rick Wakeman, Alan White. And they were absolutely wonderful. The opening act was an Australian prog band called Sebastian Hardy, who I got to find out about for the very first time, seeing them on that opening for Yes. Only opening act I've ever seen get a standing ovation at a concert. So, and Yes was spectacular, absolutely wonderful. And I actually got to meet all of them except Alan White the day after they did a signing at a bookstore. And
Cool.
unfortunately, there was a photo of me with them, and I don't know where that went, which is a real shame. But Rick Wakeman came in with like a big wizard hat on, and I remember being stunned at how big Chris Squire is. That man was huge.
Yep.
So, yeah, one of the absolute highlights of my concert going life.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, Bicyclelegs, and thank you, Davey, for coming into the show. Any final words on this album? Yes, 90125. I'll throw it to you, Davey. Any final words?
Yeah, if I could just add one thing about this was the record that really blew them up huge in the American market. Because I would read Billboard magazine back in the day, and 6 out of 9 of the songs from 90125 placed on the Billboard mainstream rock charts. This record sold 3 million copies. It's their biggest selling record in America. And it's just what they're known for, even though Steve Howe might not be happy about the success of Owner of a Lonely Heart, and he plays it occasionally begrudgingly. This is the record that saved Yes. Because without this record, we wouldn't have Yes today. And Rick Wakeman once said, after we're all long dead and gone, there'll still be a Yes performing this great music we made. And his son was in the band for a brief time. I mean, they did him dirty, but that's another story for another time. I mean, this band has such a convoluted history. But this is the record that kept Yes going and has made them an institution for 57 years now. Without 90125, no Yes, they would have been a 10-year band, or 12 years, 68 to 80, 81.
Absolutely. Well said, Davey. And look, I've said this before. If it was, 200 years' time and there was an encyclopedia and you looked up the word Yes, the band, there would be a reference to Owner of the Lonely Heart. I think it's associated with this band.
Yep.
Bicyclelegs, any final words on this album?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I'll just echo what Davey said. If it wasn't for this album, we would still remember Yes, but they would not still be the institution still going to this day that they are. They would have petered out, and they would have been off into their solo careers or side projects or whatever. There may have been reunions or that sort of thing, but it wouldn't have become the institution that Yes has become today. I do want to say, in a absolutely shameless plug here, in a couple of weeks' time, Davey and I are going to be doing a show on the follow-up to this album, which is Big Generator. So check that out. I think it's coming out on the 8th of March on my channel. So, yeah, keep an eye out for that.
Absolutely. And I'll put Bicyclelegs link below. Well, as for me, I think this is a wonderful album. Killer, 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 no filler. And I'll say it again, Owner of a Lonely Heart is probably in my top 100 rock songs of all time. I never get sick of this song. I love it. And I love this album to bits. Thank you, gentlemen. Please, folks, put your comments. We love reading them. Tell us what you think of this album. Maybe your favorite Yes album, favorite Yes track. We love reading your comments. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. But one thing's for sure, you'll see these two gentlemen doing more shows in 2025. Good night and all the best, and cheers.